technically call us to order. So then, yeah, the minutes, I guess, yeah, so Roz, for those, I wasn't here, I think was Malcolm the other absent person? And do you just need the folks who were here to review? And
Malcolm was the other
Okay.
absent person. It was Willie and me and Eric.
So I guess, yeah, that leaves it to you two, whether you had any
No, I have no
edits.
comments. They're fine.
I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead and move it.
Yeah, motion to accept the minutes.
Do you need
Do you need a second?
Yep.
Okay, and then
I'll
Okay,
second
in
it.
favor of,
In favor.
all right,
Yeah.
they're all set. Okay, so are the next few, they're discussions of the, oh wait, you tell me what the next ones are, Roz.
So we don't have any
Oh.
comments.
Yeah.
They're the standing agenda, got it.
Yes.
We're in old and new business, I guess.
This is feeling very rusty. Is it over? There is a norm. Okay, right. So no, right, there's no project review, no general comments. I guess, could you, do you have any like sense of, could you talk briefly about like, we've not, why we haven't had any reviews? I think I emailed you asking when, and your explanation made sense to me, but also if you had any sense of like,
Right.
will that change? I assume at some point it will, like, because we used to have them monthly, or at least fairly regularly.
The short answer is that, am I on?
Okay, now you are.
So the board reviews things which are about change, basically. So
Right.
a new business comes in and wants a new sign or awning or something, that comes to the board. The business district has been pretty stable, and there haven't been a lot of changes in recent,
Excellent, we just
in the
got
last few
started.
months. So we haven't met because we haven't had a review in front of us. Lucy and I talked about it last week and thought we should go ahead and meet, kind of get back in the groove,
Been a
and
while.
then talk about some of the things, the
Oh.
the
We just got
ongoing
started.
business that
Okay.
we haven't had a
Here.
chance
Oh,
to.
yeah, and you've got.
So,
And do you have any sense, or like, do you think there'll be more reviews, like in the vein of change, like are there other things?
I
I'm
think
not
there's-
expecting you to like tell me when, I'm just curious.
so
You know
the
of
Capital City
undertakings.
Cheesecake Building is vacant right now. and
Right.
they'll-
We're just doing
I
this.
expect there'll be a new business going in there that will come before us at
can
some
share it.
point.
And I guess at the
Um,
least the signage is likely to, for any new business,
Right.
generally speaking. I mean,
Right.
that's what they do, but, okay.
And there's been an announcement for the haberdashery, bespoke not broke.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be
Polly
going
Sue's.
into the old tarot
Oh.
card readers.
Oh, it's not into Polly Sue's.
No.
I misread
I
the,
misread it too.
or maybe I just assumed.
Polly
Oh.
Sue's is a men's barber shop. I can't
Oh.
remember the name.
Oh.
Oh.
We'll have
So
to
I
do
imagine that
photoshops.
we will
Okay.
have the applicants coming before us with various,
The tarot card shop is leaving?
yeah. We just haven't for
Okay.
a while, so. Hi. Yes. Do you need something? I imagine it's downstairs, but you can ask at the desk right outside here. They can direct you. Sorry.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's, I don't know, helpful context. Because, yeah, we had, I mean, for a while there, I guess the other change I know we've had is that this is the first year we've done every month, is that right?
Mhm.
So our meeting frequency has been higher, so we've had more meetings to cancel. But I think it's been a while since we've
Right.
had a run of like 6 months where there hasn't been any kind of
Do you know
Yeah.
the
Review.
Tacoma Junction schedule?
wow.
The applicant has submitted for the Montgomery County Development Review. It hasn't yet been accepted by the county, which is when they look at it to make sure the application is complete. And then it's accepted and the documents are all posted online. I expect the acceptance to happen maybe in the next few weeks. They submitted just before the holidays, so I think that slowed it down a little bit because staff was out. Then there's, I don't know how to predict how long the process might take for approval. There's usually some back and forth, and they may be asked to make changes, but they'll come back with new plans. And you might know better than I do how that
Oh, I
process
was
works.
sort of zoning out. Yes, you're talking about the development review process, and then eventually they'll go to the HPC, did you say that?
I didn't, but yes,
Yeah,
that's
so
true.
they will have that also, the Historic Preservation Commission. I mean, they have a fair amount of regulatory review. Do they come back to the city?
The city operates as an agency as part of the Development Review Committee.
Okay. So, yeah.
If there are significant changes, they will probably come back to council, to city council to
Okay.
present that.
Yeah, it's a fairly lengthy regulatory review process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was the density issue resolved? Whatever happened with that, with the
I-
FAR?
I
stuff?
think that's part of the conversation
Mhm.
with the development review level, with the DRC.
I thought that had to be resolved before it even got to development review.
It didn't have to be
Because
resolved for
it's-
them to submit.
But it's-
That's my understanding.
It's possible there's a way to ask for relief. I don't know.
It's called pre-pending, whatever it is. It's not even pending, it's like,
But I mean, if they have a zoning FAR issue, maybe there's a process to request relief if it doesn't. I don't know.
yeah,
What their process is.
I know. We all wonder, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I guess, well, I checked off 2 and 3, but 4 and 5 fall in the same category of no project review, no design consultations.
Right.
So it looks like you've got the board vacancy as our next item under
Yes.
old business.
So it's actually, board membership is under new business, so maybe
Oh,
we
and
can
we
do
could,
them
yeah,
together.
and it would make sense to talk about those together.
Yeah.
I guess,
The-
so
the-
we can, go ahead.
The first point of the board vacancy for a business owner or property owner has been on the agenda for a long
Right.
time. The board is established by city code in such a way that it requires 2 of the seats to be filled by designer, architect folks, 2 of the seats to be filled by, or 1 and an alternate by historic Takoma representatives,
Mm-hmm.
2 of the seats to be filled by commercial property owner and/or business owner in the historic district. And so Eric Sepler fills one of those
Right.
seats for us, but we've had a vacancy for quite a long time now for that second seat. So we've talked about it before, but I just encourage people to think if there's a business owner that you, or commercial property owner that you think would be a good member of the committee. Sometimes the personal connection is more likely to get someone to say yes than putting a notice in the city newsletter or something.
Yeah, I've noticed it's been in
Less
there.
personal approach.
Which is good, but yeah, that makes sense.
And I thought it might be useful to pair with the membership conversation because the terms are set up to end at the end of March on a rotating basis. So it's a 3-year term, and they're.
I see, and you've got the dates for everyone.
Right, and so
on
the
there.
code limits, not the historic Tacoma representatives, but everybody else to 2 3-year terms. And so, Willie, that puts you coming up at the end of your second term. And Anne, you're coming up on the end of your first term if you're interested in renewing. And then we'll go back to historic Tacoma and request the board to
Right.
appoint new members for the coming year.
Mhm.
So we've got the business owner slot currently, and then with Willie's departure at the end of March,
We need an
it could
architect.
either be open, so and then there's, I guess, so Willie and Ann both fill one of the requirements, is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'd have, right, Ann's decision, and if you want to say what you're planning, you're welcome to, but if you want to think
I'm happy to stay
about
on
it.
if it's needed.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be
And
great.
then, just to clarify, in your circumstances, Willie, the code is that a person's required to sit out for a year, and then they can re-engage if there's a vacancy,
Okay.
so,
Maybe just in time for the junction, we'll see.
Yeah, right. Wow.
again.
Okay, so then if you're
Yeah.
staying on, at least that open, like, so then the vacancy we would have is open-ended. It could be any of the
Right.
categories or not a
Right.
category, is that correct?
Right, and then
Okay.
we have at-large, so, out of the 7 board members, there's, I think, 2 are at-large,
Okay.
meaning
Okay.
they don't have a required spot.
And so that person would then start in April,
Mhm.
correct? That April would be the first meeting they'd attend.
Yes,
Ideally, if
so-
we can
The
Get someone
appointment
lined up.
is a council appointment, so I will put a renewal in for Anne. It'll probably be on a consent agenda for city council. I'll do it before the March 31st deadline, so that'll be contiguous, but we'll then have 2 openings to fill.
In terms of the business owner, do we ever do any official outreach? I mean, I know you're saying the personal connection is better, but, I mean, so many of those businesses have new business owners, and they
Mhm.
might be, I don't know them, but I mean, they might be amenable to, and some of them have come before this board.
Yeah.
That's
I don't
true.
know.
I hate to say it, but I feel like the ones I know are the ones who are always in their business.
Right.
Like that,
They're
that's,
busy.
I mean, I know
Yes.
them
Yeah,
because they're
right.
always working.
Yeah, they're busy, yeah,
That's part of the challenge.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good thought. Folks who have come
Outreach.
before the
Yeah.
board as a potential, that they would have some context and
Yeah.
might see the value in a way that if you are not familiar with it,
Mhm.
it would be an unknown ask.
And I can do some of that.
That would be great. The, and who did you say is going where the tarot card, that's the,
It's
Vintage clothing.
Vintage men's clothing.
or-
Mhm.
and then, the Amano owner's daughter is opening the taco place, so that's,
Oh, right. There's
That's
another new
the-
business.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
And I think they're hoping to open this month.
Oh,
Where is
oh,
the-
great.
Where
in
is
the
the
old
taco?
Subway.
I'm sorry?
The old
Subway.
Subway.
Oh.
and then
Oh,
Takoma
cool,
Bevco,
cool.
those owners are very locally oriented. One was
Yeah,
a Blair
that's true.
teacher. I don't know, there's a lot of new businesses. I don't know if, anyway, just something
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
Okay. So I guess end point being, keep your eyes out for people who might be interested or you might think of. And then is it just, a good next step to have them, to put them in touch with you for more
Yeah.
information and that kind of thing?
Yeah. And they can
Okay.
check the webpage
Right.
on the city website on the facade board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Did I
Okay.
read correctly the other day that the theater is being rehabilitated?
Mhm.
It is, okay,
Yeah.
so I think there's a number of different vendors who are gonna be.
It's
set up in
Children's
there.
Hospital and then a couple food,
I think a-
retail
Mhm.
businesses. It's a
Okay.
children's house,
It's a
outpatient.
Right, a
clinic.
pediatric
Oh.
clinic, I think,
Okay.
affiliated with children's. Yeah. That's actually in DC, so it won't come
Oh,
officially
yeah.
before us.
I thought it was kind of muddy there. It's kind of squishy. I didn't really.
Yeah, there's a
I know.
stretch where the road, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
But it is DC. I know,
Um,
it'd be fun to see that one.
Okay. Anything else on the membership discussion, either
No,
Roz
if-
or if anyone
if
has
you-
ideas?
If you do have recommendations and you want to feed them to me, I'm happy to make the contact. If you don't want to, if you don't know them personally or don't want to go ask, I can do that.
Okay.
I think that's the fun part.
Yeah,
is Actually meeting these individuals and,
yeah, I think so too.
yeah.
Okay. All right, so then, I guess back under old business, we've, for a while had retroactive reviews as an issue to discuss. I know at this point it's been kind of a while, but, it is something that I know it was a little tricky to wade through when it came up before. I guess would you, Roz, want to briefly describe kind of what we went through, and if anyone else wants to add to it, that's
Yeah.
great. But just I know I personally need a little bit of a refresher of
We've had a
what we're dealing
couple,
with.
a couple of applicants who came after the changes were already done, and they need to go through the county historic preservation process anyway, and so we are part of that. Our arrangement with the county is that the board will, for commercial businesses in the historic district, which is this area, the board will respond to an application. So we can approve, we can approve with conditions, we can disapprove. We can also say for a variety of reasons that we're not weighing in on something. So, for instance, if it's August and we can't get a quorum together, I can write a letter saying, we're not going to be able to comment on this one. And that becomes part of the application, so it fulfills the requirement that the applicant has to get the city involvement, but it doesn't hold up the process if we just can't manage to do that. That's pretty rare. I can't think of a
Yeah.
time
Yeah, I don't
when
know
it's
that we've
come
done
up.
it since I've been
It's
on,
very rare.
Yeah.
waived it because of a lack
Because-
of quorum in
right.
the schedule, yeah.
So we've had a couple retroactive reviews, which in recent experience have been pretty messy. And I don't think messy cases are a good way to make policy, but I think it's
Right.
worth considering. At the time, we had discussions saying maybe the board should just flip the switch on that option of saying we're not weighing in. If the board wanted to unilaterally say it's already built, and we can go look at it and say, what we think of it, but if the purpose of the board is as advisory, that
We've missed the
ship has
opportunity,
sailed,
right. And I guess the it's not that we would have any kind of official, like, we could always change our minds.
Sure.
But this would just be like, so one, this would be a chance to discuss it separate from a specific applicant
Right.
situation. And then two, we could decide on a norm that we could be reminded of next time it comes up.
Right.
And decide at the time to some extent, I mean.
Right.
Right,
And
it
I'm
would,
not
it's not like
ad-
it would be anything that would tie us to a plan, but it could give us a cohesive starting point if we still agreed at the time.
Yes,
Okay.
and personally, I'm not advocating a position. I just know the board has talked around this several times, and it's hard to have the conversation when you have an applicant in front of you
Right.
who messed up the first time through the process, and it may be another messy one where there's no way that we're all going to be happy about it. That's a harder time to say, do we want to weigh in on retroactives or not? Or do we want to weigh in on this retroactive or not? So I thought it might be useful to just kind of, there are downfalls, as we've talked about before, in retroactives at all. And the board has the option. So that's
So-
just why it's on here.
From my perspective, that this is part of the permitting process, and you have to appreciate that. So it's not like, oh, we're advisory, and if we meet or we don't meet, it's of no consequence. So, because if you go to Montgomery County that issues the building permits, it's a requirement that it gets a letter from the advisory board saying what was your opinion. Now, the authority lies with the county, not here, but the letter is required. What we approve or we disapprove is a requirement for a applicant who's applying for a permit. So maybe that's a little why we're in this forum as opposed to back where we used to sit, around the table, because it actually is part of the process. So just like anything, if someone, didn't need to go through the historic board or facade advisory board and still build something without a permit, they're in the exact same position, historic and not historic. That if they did it and it's not in conformance with permission to do it, and if the construction is not in accordance with Montgomery County codes, they can ask them to remove the structure and start over again, or fix whatever is identified as being deficient. So that perspective is no different than what this board should be doing. So if you say a retroactive, we still have an obligation under the codes of the Montgomery County, unless the city decides we are no longer part of the historic process, that it's going to be completely with the HPC, and we kind of nullify this board, then that's the only other option I see where we don't contribute to any kind of, whether it's retroactive or not. So I don't, unless you change Montgomery County, clearly, if you go to, someone says, what do I need for a permit? Just Google it. Go through the process and fill out the paperwork that's required. It will tell you that you have to go in front of the facade advisory board for a determination, for advice of whether they approve it or not. And they'll weigh in that advice, so.
And piggybacking on that, I would like to add two thoughts. One is the Historic Preservation Commission reviews retroactive applications as if they're applications. So they don't look at it as sort of, it's already been built and maybe there's a little more flexibility. So but that, they are looking at projects all over the county, the commissioners live all over the county, and to have the local advisory board weigh in and say, we don't support this, carries a ton of weight. And so if we don't weigh in, it puts them in a tougher position to be tough, because if they have an applicant in front of them who's very sympathetic, saying, I didn't know, and I'm really sorry, and as much as they may not think it meets the standards, if the local board hasn't weighed in, I think it's harder for them to say no. So I would encourage us to review it as if it's a new application, and would we support it? Do we think it meets the standards of this board? And I would encourage us to make a recommendation.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the procedure of whether it's correctly filed or not is not part of this board. It is simply part of this board to say, you're responsible for providing your advice on what's presented in front of you. Whether it's in compliance with some other regulations that are within the Montgomery County Authority is not for us to judge, saying, oh, we don't review this because it's retroactive. Whether it's retroactive is not the authority of this board. So that's the reason why, again, I completely agree that it's just, it's a requirement of the permitting process. So.
I agree with both of you, and I think it is our responsibility to review it, and I think it would send a terrible message if we did not. It would be very confusing, as I think, Anne, you've kind of alluded to, and I think it is important we review them. A retroactive permit, it doesn't necessarily have to be messy, or let me say it another way, a regular non-retroactive permit can be messy. And so the messiness quotient is unknown, and it shouldn't really be part of anything. I mean, it's still our responsibility as part of the permit process, as Willie says, to weigh in. So I think we would always want to have that voice in there. So I think it's important.
Malcolm, any thoughts? Because I think it's been a long time since we had this, and you.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I'm not as spun up as the rest of you guys are. I guess I'm just here listening, but I do think it's important that we weigh in on just about everything. I think it's important that we do that, because if we don't, what's the purpose of this panel? Like we have to be able to engage and be able to make our presence known, and in doing that, it's kind of it's kind of laborious sometimes, but I think that's what we're charged with doing, and that's what we should set out to do.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. I don't know what our process is, but I guess like the degree to which we can have a reminder to ourselves in the future, like the emphasizing the starting point being that it's treated just like every other review seems key. Because as I think about the messy process we did end up in last time, I think there was a way in which we were negotiating in a way, maybe with ourselves, maybe with what was existing, that I guess I ended up feeling like we ended that process in a way that I didn't.
I think.
Like it just.
I think what happened.
It fell apart, and I didn't feel like we were holding true to our role. And
there was
that's.
two things that
Can
were
I
happening.
finish my sentence? I think it. I felt like I left that process feeling like we weren't able to act the way we typically were in review processes. I think it's worth being reminded, like, that's not because of the retroactive nature. That's,
Right.
I think, the mindset that I know I brought to it of like, oh, this changes it, but being reminded that like, actually it probably shouldn't, and we should remind ourselves as we go into the next one. That seems valuable. And I guess so, Roz, I guess you're our memory. So that, and it's not like I'm proposing we have some set policy, but that makes sense to me as a key piece. And I think something that I felt like was sliding last time, that's just my experience of that, but I know it did turn into a long iterative. There were other aspects that were messy, so to your point, it's not that they all will be, but I think it does start us off in a questionable place if we aren't also reminding ourselves that we're starting off in a
In a new
in
place.
in the same place that we would be
Yeah.
regardless. And Willie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, because I think part of the messiness was, it was two separate issues. One was, when it was retroactive, the gentleman who presented it did not present a complete picture of what was done on site. Okay,
That's a good point,
It was
yeah.
construed to be conformance, and that's what he told the board. And the board says, well, if you satisfy the requirements, and you're showing that you did, because your exhibits show that, then we will approve it on that basis. We didn't go out there and measure or take a photo or anything. We were relying on the information that he provided us, so we rendered an opinion, we approved it. When it went to the county had an inspector out there, plus there was a person, the neighbor, who took photos, which were different than what he had provided. And so suddenly the information changed. What he built out there wasn't what the board reviewed. And so the retroactive was that we actually then rejected his fence, that it was in place. And so that again came up saying, well, should we do that? We already approved it.
Yeah, I think
And then
that was a tricky point, was that we had a document stating that we had approved something.
Right.
But you're exactly right. It was a discrepancy
Yeah.
in what was presented at different
And I
points in
think
time.
one of the
Yeah.
important things that I think we probably have improved since that whole thing happened was, if I remember correctly, the applicant, it was sort of very fast. He was there. And it was a quick review, maybe squeezing it in for, to go before the HPC for cycles, and that's like a, and we try to accommodate people, and try to help as much as we can. And I think that we need to have proper time to review an application, particularly if it's retroactive, because there's something there to go and look at. Whereas, and it's important that we do, because to gain perspective, whereas a typical application, you're looking at the plans and it's not yet built. And it's a very different situation. And so I think I would just like to say, if we ever have that situation again, it has to be scheduled so that the person doesn't arrive at this meeting that we're at and it's like a rapid, there has to be time, in other words, Ross, is what I'm saying, for us to be able to really understand, so we don't ever fall into that, we didn't have enough information here, we didn't have the right photos, we didn't have, because I think that is the one difference, I would say, because it's, plans are one thing, but when it's built is another. So let's just make sure that we schedule them so that we do have time to go out and visit, and so we are knowledgeable, as what we're seeing. And that would be very helpful. I don't expect we're going to see many of these things again in the future. I really don't. But that was, I think, an important lesson that we learned from that. So, anyway.
Great.
I'd just like to say
Yeah.
that could be a policy decision of the board to say, if we have a retroactive.
Oh, here, hold on, Ross. Let me make sure.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Could be a policy decision on the board's part to say, when we have a retroactive application, that we want to make a site visit.
Right.
I think at a minimum, to Lorraine's point about time, allowing. I mean, we
And
could
then what does
say
that-
set an amount of time now that we'd prefer,
what would
because it's
that
not
be?
an easy thing to get out and do. Even when it's a week's turnaround, it depends. I mean, I don't expect a lot more than that, but I do think that's it is kind of an additional ask of our board. But I agree with Lorraine that it's important when it's there, because we're not going to know what's not represented.
And how do you, Willie and Ann, how do you feel about that? Does that make sense?
Right.
Having plenty of time.
Well, having enough time,
Enough
at
time. I
least
mean,
get
we've had
out. It might be a
applications
couple
without
days.
Site
Or
plans and without photos, so yes, certainly having all the information provided.
I'm sorry.
does that make sense? I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. It just needs to be maybe a few days or something for us to be able to run by there. We're all local, we can run over and see what it is.
I mean, I
So
think if
we
we're
are-
actually, go ahead.
We are sending out the agenda a week ahead. generally speaking, we missed it this week. I think it was 6 days because of the holiday, so I was a little bit off. But does a week? If you get the agenda,
Yeah, I think as long as it's a full week,
Yeah.
and I know sometimes
That's great.
you're reliant on when you get information, but that, yeah, if it
Yeah.
includes a weekend plus a week of evenings, I think, like, thinking of
Okay.
my own work schedule, like, that's a nice minimum.
Yeah, then we can agree on the agenda, because we don't have the materials to review that's on the agenda. Then we could tell you that,
Right.
well, we can't review it because we don't have any information, and we certainly don't want to be presented the information at the time of the meeting to suddenly then be, at the end of the meeting, having to render an opinion.
Right.
Right, and that's where I think the point is being saying,
Right.
it's always the case, whether rec rev or not, it's a requirement that it's a week in advance that we
Right.
submit the materials for a review. And if it's deficient, we ask for additional materials and they've usually been coming in, whatever we had requested, so it
Yeah, and I
seems
know
to
that
work.
is something that Roz regularly does.
Yeah.
And it's always a little bit of a judgment call when we don't get it, but I think it is, like, from experience, we've all observed the range of things that come before us. And yeah, some are, a single sign is a simpler undertaking than a
Right.
And
fence.
one other
Yeah.
thought that occurred to me is that in saying these things, we want to be sure that we don't give a pass to something that we might feel very strongly about if we go and see it. So in other words, we don't want a person scheduling it so that they're about to put their foot in the door with the HPC and we haven't had a chance to get out and look at it, and somehow we're not going to review it, and I don't think that would be right either. So I would say that we would, I would certainly hope that it would be rescheduled with the HPC if there was a situation like this with a retroactive permit, if there was time was so short that we just couldn't get out to see it. And I wouldn't want it something that, I wouldn't want to forfeit review of something that might be very, very important to give local input on. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I wouldn't say we need a week necessarily for something like that. But what do you guys think about that?
I think it should just follow the same procedure. Like, we review each thing as if it was a new submission. There's no caveat to any of the the applicant's.
Yeah,
Right?
You need to turn your mic on.
It shows up as on here. Wait, are you?
Yeah.
No, that's not. Yeah.
No, you're not on.
I'll just speak up. When they fill out the application, it's not any different. It doesn't say, check these boxes, is it
Right.
retroactive, is it whatever, and it doesn't say,
That's true.
and will it follow up with materials, a day before the meeting, and check, yes, I will be following up with materials a day before the meeting. It doesn't say that. It just says the application has to be complete at the time and on your
Right.
site. It's very clear on those requirements. So we don't have to debate it. There's only one version of the application, and it's clearly defined in those requirements. And so
That's true.
it's nothing that, unless we want to change them, if we want to change it to add a tick in the box, which I don't think we should, then.
Yeah.
so.
Is that not picking up? Oh. Yeah, it's not lit up the way the other. Or I
Okay,
guess mine's not lit up
okay.
either, and it sounds like it's
Yeah.
working. So
And
okay.
the HPC, I don't believe, will review something without a letter from us anyway, so we get to decide that, that we, have time to get in and see that before we give a letter. So in
Yeah.
essence, that's probably not something to worry about, that
Yeah.
they'll reschedule it then.
Mhm.
Great. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
does that make sense?
yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. That was helpful to hear, fleshed out, and reflected on, even though it's
Yeah.
been a bit. So then the last item is the discussion of the meeting format and public comments. So again, Roz, I know you've provided us with what I think our original reference was. If you want to just briefly outline
Sure.
what we're
So-
looking at.
About a year ago, we shifted to this location and to a more structured, more formal format than we had been using. And we have had little discussions around the edges. Do we need to make the opportunity for public comments longer, recognizing that sometimes people are inexperienced and nervous and 2 minutes is too small. Do we want to look at reorganizing? So I just thought after about a year of using this, it was maybe useful to circle back and see if we feel like this serves our purposes.
No, I mean, I think it's appropriate for this format for what we do. So, and it is, so then it has more weight. And regarding the duration, I didn't think it was that critical, except when there was the Takoma Junction here, and you did start to have a crowd. So the rules are there for, should there be an instance that you can't control. Most of the times we don't have it, but the rules are there for when you have like the second round of this Takoma Junction. I'm pretty sure from what I've been reading, this is going to be full. So to change it and say, well, you can speak as long as you want, or longer than 5 minutes, you got to start doing the math, and you have to let everybody speak. Then you're going to be here all night, which the council was. I mean, to their credit. So I would say just stay with the rules. Most times it's not an issue. Yeah. But when you need it, then you can make a point of introducing the rules for those occasions where you think you're going to need it. Yeah.
Well, I imagine that we can always, if we need to clarify something from someone, have a question, if a person brings something up that we're interested in hearing, we can ask, them to elaborate as needed, beyond the 2 minutes if we feel it's important for us to hear it. So I would imagine we have that flexibility to do that on occasion if,
I think that's the board's choice.
Right. Yeah, it's our choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would want our norm to be pretty consistent. I mean, I think you're right, Willie. The reality is that it's not frequent that we need that kind of structure, but there's also a value to consistency and not making exceptions. I mean, I think you're right. It's a question.
It may be.
I'd be comfortable with a follow-up question. I think that's
Right.
that's the kind of thing, though, that I think it's worth us. We should address it when we get there, but I think it's easier to address it when we've got a structure. And in general, I've appreciated having the structure provided, the consistency, even when we don't have sessions. It is, especially when we've had this long gap, it's right. It's nice to, we have this routine. I think one of the changes that we've only sort of tested out a few times, but having the comments before the review itself, I'd be interested to hear how people have perceived that. I think I see the advantage of it being that it lets anyone who wants to comment attend earlier and get their point across. I mean, the flip side, though, is that you're getting the reaction in a way ahead of the presentation. So that's one piece I'd be curious to hear how you all have received it, or if.
Well, because when the Takoma Junction presented, those materials were on the site for everybody to review. And there was a reason why they had their comments when they arrived. And so, and it's good to have the applicant hear the comments before they present it. So if they wanted to address any of the comments, they had that opportunity too. After the fact, it just becomes this back and forth. So I think the format makes sense to me.
It also meant we could hear the concern. It was part of our, and we had that information by the time we were asking questions of the applicant, which I found useful.
Yeah.
It was good context.
I can also commit to getting the agenda and additional items, information up when I email it to all of you, that it then goes up on the website. So for those occasions when there would be public comment, they can see it.
And where it may not already be as public. Like the junction was already, it had gone through other processes in the city. I think obviously sometimes we get things that aren't at that scale. But that would be great, and it would be nice to know that we could point people to that if there are questions, or you can't. I mean, I think you're the one who's likely interfacing with most of them. But,
but if people can go on the website and see the agenda and any supplementary materials, the week leading up to it.
Yeah.
then-
Right. I don't know if we, the way, I actually like the way the HPC does it, because they allow the speakers to hear what the applicant has to say. And many times you learn different things. There's more information, there's more elaboration, and it may affect how people, their questions, in other words, or their concerns. And that's one of the things that I've struggled with, doing it the way the city council does it. Or do we really want to have it done so that, most information gets out there, and then they can comment on that, and we can understand how they are reacting or feeling, or any other issues that may come up that they're not aware of. I just bring that up because it's a very different approach, and
So just to clarify, the HPC process, it's
Yeah,
the presentation of the applicant
right,
first, then the public
and then
comment.
the public comes after.
And then.
So you benefit, if you're there to speak, you hear all the detail that's being presented, which is very helpful.
And then when
actually.
is does the HPC ask questions of the applicant? Does it happen before, after,
Both.
intermittently?
They can certainly ask during the presentation for clarification, but after the HPC hears the concerns, they have a lot of questions to ask then the applicant, which makes it a very strong and robust process, because they're very informed at that point. And that's the one problem I have with the way we've set it up. We haven't had to deal with it a lot,
Right,
It's
right.
like, but I could see a situation where it might be important for us to hear what's being said, by the people who are here, as they get a chance to, and I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
What I get concerned is that if they present first, and then someone gets to say, they can make it personal. They said, well, you said, that's always the trouble. When it's the other way, becomes more, you saw the material, you get to comment on the material, and they can ask, or we can ask, can you address someone's comment? That's our job. And we can filter on the way the applicant needs to answer the question. If he has to answer the question to people in the audience, then in my mind, we are not the intermediary board that will help filter the information that we need. So your point is saying, if I hear a question, I hear it's kind of messy because they're not, they're maybe not an architect, or whether they got the language mixed up a little bit, perhaps. And then so you can ask, I understand the intent of the question, and that becomes our concern because it's true. And then we can ask the applicant, that, and that's where our role plays. So that's why, without
we can try it
the
that
format,
way.
I think was good because it keeps the roles. They have they should say what they need to want to say, but not. It's not a critique of their presentation. It's a critique of the project, and as they see
Right.
it, right? Or
Right.
they as they understand it.
It's certainly the way it happens at the HPC, there's generally more information that's presented in oral testimony than you get on site plans, et cetera. And so it's structured, I think, to have the most robust kind of dialogue you can, and the commission can ask as many questions as they want, and so we can, I happen to like I think the HPC way of doing it better. I'm okay with staying with this and seeing how that works and trying it, Willie. you know, your way for us to, but it's
that's not
just
my way.
that there may be additional information that they're not going to inform us of, that they may know something and want to convey it, and it's very frustrating to not be able to do that after they hear a presentation is all. And, you know, it might be something that we all want to hear, and I'm not sure we need to resolve this tonight, but I just want you to think about it, and I'm fine whatever way you want to do it.
Yeah. Well,
Anne or
just-
Malcolm, do you guys have?
I'm fine
Thoughts
with
on the process?
format as it is now.
Okay.
I'm fine with the format as it is as well. I did have one comment on the on public comments, and I think we're talking. Somebody was mentioning earlier about limits, and I think you're talking about standardizing it. I think we can adjust as needed depending on what is being presented. There's some things that some folks are just going to be more passionate about. There are others that some aren't, and I think we can maybe decide on speaking limits depending on how serious those cases are. Like the junction, yeah, people are going to sit up here and they're going to pontificate
Can you
for
make
hours.
sure you're talking into the mic?
Yeah,
just
sorry.
For, no, just I mean, just for the
Yeah.
recording. I can
Yeah.
hear. I'm sure we can all hear you, but
So
I think
I'm just saying,
nah, you're off. Yeah,
there's
there you
certain
go.
cases where people are just going to pontificate for hours on end about something, and I just think we need to allow them. We have to be able to give the public a voice in these cases as well, and let them speak their opinions, because this is what we exist for. We give them a platform to be able to engage with these individuals who are trying to are going to have a lasting impact in our community, and it's something that we all have to look at
yeah.
day in and day out. So I think that's really important. I think really we serve the community at large. We don't serve the individuals who are putting these applications forward, and it's I don't want to retard it to seem like that, but we serve the community, and we need to be able to empower them so that they can engage and have some sort of ownership in this process as well. And I think that's really important. So I just don't want us to lose our heart and our soul in this process by selling them short.
Yeah, I think the 2-minute limit, I think, felt a little bit on the short side when we had public comment from the junction, and I think would
Yeah.
probably feel even shorter if it wasn't in a context that required that kind of structure. At the same time, I think having sat in this role for the junction comments, it was fairly important to me that we just had a set time and that we just stuck with it and didn't that we weren't asked, it just makes it a slippery slope of, if we're changing it, I don't know. I mean, I think making the call on the spot is a little funny. I think I would be open to considering a longer duration, and the reality is we've not had this a lot. I think the junction was the main time we've used this, and that review did have, I think it had a handful of comments. So I guess hearing the range of things that were brought up, I guess my inclination would be to leave it for now, but let's see how it goes in the next review or two.
Yeah.
And maybe in 6 months talk about it, assuming we have a handful of reviews. And that gives, it's a little lower pressure when it's just one person here. But I also would rather us not treat the junction like a whole different thing, because the reality is it is following the same process from our
Right.
standpoint.
Yes.
There's a lot more to it than a sign, so I'm not trying to pretend that it's the same thing, but I think there's sort of an ease of transparency and consistency if we does it look like we're opposing or allowing something, so consistency is valuable to me, and I think in the role where I'm facilitating that, and whoever would be the next person to do that, you can it's like that it can be something we evolve as well. But does does the review in about 6 months sort of a similar conversation where we're informed by this one? I don't want us to waste time repeatedly reviewing things, but it is a new structure.
I would also
And we'll still be a little bit new in 6 months. Go ahead,
I would
sorry.
just add that I support the consistency, especially for people who are not comfortable with public speaking. It's intimidating to come to the council chambers on this board up on the dais. And I know people who write their comments out, time them, make sure that they fit exactly in the time
True.
allotted. And so if it changes and they're expecting to have more time,
Right.
that throws them off.
Change it on the fly isn't the same experience for
So I
everyone. That
think-
makes a lot of sense.
Having it something that everybody knows what to expect is really helpful.
Right. I also wanted to add, also for the individuals who just can't make it out here, like my wife wants to be engaged and stuff like this, but she's at home breastfeeding, like it's just
Yeah.
like, or taking care of children. We need to be able to provide some sort of means that they can engage with us online or via conference call or something of that nature, so that people are just, the only option that's not available to them is physically being here. I think in this day and age, I think we can accommodate those individuals some way, somehow. There's a website I use at work called freeconferencecall.com, and if I want to hold a conference call, I'll just call it on my cell
Yeah, you're right.
phone.
There are lots of services that.
There's tons of resources out there available. I just think we kind of needed just kind of spitball back and forth and figure out what may work best. If the city doesn't already have something that we can already utilize, what out there that's free, something that's efficient, that can also serve that purpose, can we use to meet that need.
Yeah, Ross, are there other things like that the city's doing or looking at?
The city does have a bridge line conference call
Okay.
number that we can use, and we've done it before when we've had absent members who wanted to call in. We haven't looked at doing it for public comments, but that would be useful.
Right.
We also have council meetings are streamed live. We haven't done it for these meetings. These are archived, but that might be something to look into. And the other option then, of course, is getting public comments ahead of time. So if we post the materials ahead of time, we can set up a seamless doc where somebody can send us written comments
Yes.
that would then be available for the board
Yeah.
during the meeting or prior to the meeting
Right.
to look at. And that should be a very straightforward thing that I could probably put into place this week. Just get it up on our website.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I think that's a great point. I think it sounds like both the bridge option is like something that exists that we can note on our website is an option, and that Roz can then facilitate. And then again the written advanced. I know it's not the same as participating, but in some ways it's easier.
Right.
Logistically, it's another option. I think having different ways for people to provide us comment is valuable.
And it sort of
and then we
speaks to
could
that.
see if the stream, I think streaming seems like a big next step for something that generally is a small audience, but
Right.
that sounds like an improvement in and of itself, that there is an option where
Right.
there's an audio version and a written version.
Right. And I think it'll facilitate better participation, and it speaks to your point of people who are just sort of nervous about public speaking. If they're doing it from the comfort of their home or on their cell phone, I think they're more likely to be concise in what they're saying, and that they're not sitting here and fumbling with their words to try to figure out what they want to say.
Yeah,
So
or ahead of
I
time in
think
an
that-
email. I mean, it's sort of
Right.
the same function
Yeah.
of if that's your more
Yeah.
comfortable mode.
Or written format.
Yeah.
I
So
will
that we
Great.
can review and say, hey, we got a member, we got somebody, who has this question that we sort of deemed, important enough to bring up for
Yeah.
everybody.
No, I think that's a great idea. Because I think I would be happy to see more public participation. And I think
Right.
people do care about what's happening in
They do.
our commercial district,
Yeah.
but it's all, you don't always know in time. This is kind of the way I end up getting updates on what's
Yeah.
going on. But I think the more ways we have to let people engage, the better. And
Yeah.
it'd be great if it
Like,
meant there was more
I
public
live in the same
participation.
neighborhood as Jim DeLuigi, and I speak to a lot of the, I refer to them as hipsters. We got a lot of young couples, just like myself, who are moving in, and they're just busy. We're super busy. We got kids, we have careers, we're in our prime earning, years of our lives, and we do want to be engaged with our communities and stuff like that, but it's hard for us to get out here afterwards. And so I hear these things when we have our picnics in the summer, stuff like that, like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know the tarot shop was becoming a men's vintage store, things of that nature.
Right.
If I had some way of engaging, you guys electronically, that
Yeah,
would,
yeah.
So that's something that just kind of popped in my head last minute. Sorry to kind of
No,
hijack
that
it.
makes sense.
I think it's a
I
great
just
idea.
had a thought in all this. When do we notice adjacent and confronting neighbors when we have something come up before us?
We do not. We do know that that's part of the county historic preservation
Right.
process, and so we know that they go from here to the applicant comes
Right.
from us and then goes to HPC.
Right. It just made me realize that if people don't know something is being discussed and they live right next to it, they don't know to come here necessarily. And that's something we should think about, because if we want more public participation and we want people to know we're really not letting them know, and they know and go to the HPC, and that's when their concerns, come out. So I invite us to think about that a little bit and whether we should be doing that. And I just wanted to clarify one quick thing with the last discussion we had. I think we ended the retroactive with, we want a week of review time, and because it's the process. And I know I said, well, we could even do it in a couple of days. However, we're going to stick to our requirement for a week, right?
Yeah, I think-
I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
no,
Yeah,
that's-
that I didn't interject some confusion
Yeah,
into
no.
that. Right, okay.
No, and I
So-
understood your point was that
Yeah.
it wasn't that, if we didn't have
Yeah.
a week, what was sacrificed was our review.
Yeah,
So-
we're not going to do that either.
And I
Right.
think that,
Yeah.
and then that's, normally
Yeah.
there's at the minimum an email exchange about
Yeah.
what's come up, how do we want to handle it.
Right.
So I
Right.
don't see a
No,
reason not
it's
to
for the
have that
best.
information as how
Yeah.
things come together, because
People have different schedules, and we
Yeah.
have to have time
But I
to
think-
get
yeah.
to see it. A week is reasonable.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that
Good.
sounds like a good bottom line to
Good.
hold.
Yes.
Related to that, do we want to continue to schedule monthly meetings and cancel when we don't need them? As opposed to what we did previously, which was schedule every other month. And then sometimes we were trying to add, checking on if we had a quorum to introduce a new one.
How do you, we're saving the dates anyway.
Yeah, I
How do you
I
all-
preferred, I think it's easier for me to have a regular time. I mean, right, if I have a conflict, I have a conflict. But I know we've accommodated. There was a spell where I felt like we were meeting maybe 2 or 3 years ago, meeting more out of cycle than in cycle.
Right.
Right.
Around the summertime.
Yes.
And
That
I
was
think it was
awful.
somewhat chance,
Yeah,
but it
that
did
was
mean
not
that we
good.
were
Yeah.
scrounging
I agree.
and yeah, it was harder to predict. And I think this time,
I think this is better.
Part of what's helped me say to applicants, you need to have the materials in a week ahead of time, and if you don't, we'll bump it to the next month,
Yes.
is I knew there was a meeting scheduled for the next month.
I think
Yeah.
that.
If we're s-
Yeah, I like this.
If we're trying to insert
Yeah.
a new meeting, that's harder on everyone's.
and I don't think
schedule.
we've had a separate out
don't
of
think so.
cycle meeting
No.
in the last year. And we did, aside from the run we had, the first half of the year, we had a reasonable number of applicants.
Yeah.
I'd rather do it this way, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Every month, and then
Yeah.
as you've been doing,
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
on business,
It makes
cancel it.
sense.
Good.
And it does seem like I think we've also been able to reach a quorum most every month. I know but the more we meet, the more you're going to end up catching people in conflicts. But I think
Yeah,
that's also
'cause we're
conversely not been an
reserving
issue
those
that we've been
days, Right.
Right.
Yeah.
unable to
No, that
meet
makes
that.
sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. that's good.
Any other thoughts on the meeting process and any reactions to the general approach of leaving it as is for now, but starting the conversation again in 6 months when we've had a little more exposure?
Okay.
That's fine.
Does that sound good? Okay.
Yes.
So I think that was it, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're adjourned.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank
meeting.
you.